Hi, my name is Mel, and I'm going to talk about Christian nationalism and why it's harmful. Okay, Christian nationalism is being widely discussed because it blends religious identity with political power, and many researchers, journalists, and scholars warn that this fusion can create real social and democratic risks, and it is doing that, like particularly in the US, but elsewhere as well. I'm going to walk everyone through reputable sources, what they say about the ideology, why it can raise concerns, and grounding everything in the material that from articles that are around. So, what Christian nationalism is. Scholars describe Christian nationalism as a belief that a nation, especially the United States of America, is and should remain a Christian country, and that government should actively promote Christian values and identity and discourage what they view as non-Christian values and identity. This includes ideas such as a government declaring the nation officially Christian, laws being based on specific interpretation of Christianity, national identity being tied to be Christian. And they've got laws now in the US of like if anti-Christian activity, which could just be an atheist like me, and I don't live in the US, I'm not a US citizen, or anyone who's Muslim or anything else. Even progressive Christians can be targeted. It is not a denominational church, it is a political ideology that uses religious language to shape national identity and public policy. And I want to say a lot of Christians, and most Christians, are not Christian nationalists, right? And I want to say that's true of in America and Australia. This is a view of a minority, but a very powerful minority who are changing the laws and making life difficult for everybody else. So, why scholars and civil rights groups say Christian nationalism is harmful? It undermines the separation of church and state. Christian nationalism often rejects the idea that government should be secular and remain neutral towards any religion, which it should. All governments around all the world. I'm going to do it about Islamic nationalism as well. So this is not just sort of picking on Christians or Christianity. Okay, I have absolutely nothing against Christians or Christianity. I am specifically talking about those minority who think, that Christianity there should be imposed on everybody else, like being anti-gay, anti-trans, women should be subservient or not work at all. Especially white Christian nationalism, they do not like black or brown people, or immigrants or people who are not Christian. So, so if you have a Christian nationalism, it does go against the Americans' constitution, but they don't not sticking to any of their constitution at the moment. So I don't see why one more principle they're breaking. Like it is harmful, obviously, but they're breaking all of them. So, but look, there should be basic freedom of belief or non-belief for everyone. I mean, if we were to make laws against being a Christian or a Muslim, for instance, there'd be absolute outrage, especially if it's against Christianity, right? But I think this is everyone should have the freedom to believe or not believe as their conscience dictates. So, look, it also promotes exclusion and will define who belongs. So, researchers note that Christian nationalism often carries a belief that real citizens are Christian and non-Christians are less authentically part of the nation. So this does marginalise religious minorities, atheists and agnostic, immigrants, and people who do not fit a narrow cultural ideal. It also fuels intolerance and discrimination, and it is doing that. Articles highlight that Christian nationalism has been linked to anti Semitism, hostility towards other faiths and non faith, and resistance to religious diversity and also definite bigotry against LGBTQIA plus people and definite bigotry against non white people. Okay, so when political identity is tied to single religion, disagreement becomes framed as moral or a spiritual failure or even a citizenship failure rather than a genuine democratic difference. Being Christian nationalism weakens democratic values. And look, let's be honest, America is not a democracy if it ever was one. Experts interviewed by PBS warn that Christian nationalism often supports the idea that government should and currently is enforcing a specific religious worldview, like funding the state of Israel and its genocidal war against Palestinians, which conflict with a democracy. All right, and it can weaken democratic values. So, experts interviewed by PBS warn that Christian nationalism supports the idea that government should, as I said, support a religious worldview. And this includes supporting laws that privilege one religion, viewing political enemies as opponents as enemies of God and not American citizens in that case, justifying anti-democratic actions as divinely sanctioned. It is often exploited by extremist movements. Many groups that are, Christian nationalists use Christian nationalist language to justify political violence, white Christian nationalism, authoritarian leadership, spiritual warfare rhetorics that frames politics as a cosmic battle. And so it escalates ordinary political disagreements into existential conflicts. It distorts what Christianity is itself. Some Christian writers and theologians argue that Christian nationalism replaces a spiritual belief with a political identity, turning faith into a tool for power. And this is how it is used, rather than a personal or communal practice. And this is what Christian nationalism does do. And look, I want to again emphasize most Christians and Christian communities and churches and organizations do not do this. This is the act of a small minority. And so, look, I don't think they are using political power to get what they want. I don't think that is Christianity, but they are using the terms of Christianity, which is unfortunate because I don't think it really applies. So look, the big picture is across sources, the concerns are not about Christianity as a religion. I want to emphasize that. Or Christians in general. It's about using any religion, in this instance Christianity, as a political identity that defines and counts who a real citizen is and what the nation should be. The scholars warn that this can and does erode democratic norms, and it's certainly doing that in the US and other countries as well. Marginalises minority groups, justifies exclusionary or authoritarian practices, and intensifies from social division. And I want to emphasize this again. This is not a video against Christianity. I have no problem with Christianity as a whole. I'm talking specifically about the small minority that is Christian nationalism that often comes down to white Christian nationalism. All right. So again, this is not against Christians. Most Christians are very good people. I've got family and friends who are Christian. Okay. I am an atheist, but this is not against Christianity. And I'm going to talk about other religious nationalities. I'm also going to talk about the harms done under authoritarian political ideologies, like, severe communism or socialism that's not democratic. All right. So I'm not going to just aim this at religious people because it's definitely not that. Thank you for your time.